The night was colder than usual. A harsh wind swept across the Roman frontier as thousands of soldiers slept uneasily beneath the dark sky. Beyond the camp, somewhere in the darkness, enemy forces waited. No one knew when the next attack would come. No one knew what tomorrow would bring. And inside a small military tent illuminated by a single oil lamp sat the most powerful man in the world, Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, commander of armies, ruler of millions. Yet at that moment, none of those titles mattered, because Marcus Aurelius was facing the same enemy that every human being eventually faces: pressure, the crushing weight of responsibility, the fear of making the wrong decision, the uncertainty of not knowing what happens next. One order from him could send thousands of men into battle. One mistake could cost countless lives. One emotional reaction could alter the course of history. And yet, according to those who knew him, Marcus Aurelius remained remarkably calm. Not because he lived an easy life, not because he never felt fear, not because he was somehow different from everyone else. His secret was something far more powerful. He had learned how to remain steady when everything around him was falling apart. And tonight, you are going to discover exactly how he did it. Because the truth is, pressure is not just something emperors face. It is something you face every day. Maybe not on a battlefield, but in your own life. Pressure to succeed, pressure to provide, pressure to make the right decisions, pressure to meet expectations, pressure to keep going when you feel exhausted. And if you do not learn how to handle it, pressure can quietly destroy your peace, your confidence, and sometimes even your future. But Marcus Aurelius believed there was a different way, a way to stay calm while others panic, focused while others become overwhelmed, strong while others collapse under the weight of uncertainty. And it begins with understanding one dangerous mistake that almost everyone makes. Most people believe pressure comes from outside of them. They blame circumstances, their boss, their finances, their responsibilities, their problems. But Marcus Aurelius discovered something shocking. The real source of pressure is often not the event itself. It is the story we tell ourselves about the event. Think about that for a moment. Two people can face the exact same situation. One remains calm. The other falls apart. The situation is identical. So what changed? Their minds. One person sees a challenge. The other sees the catastrophe. One sees an obstacle. The other sees disaster. One focuses on action. The other focuses on fear. Marcus Aurelius understood this better than most, because every day his mind had countless opportunities to create panic. Rome was constantly under threat. Political enemies waited for weakness. Military campaigns stretched across enormous distances. Disease spread through parts of the empire. And yet his personal writings reveal something fascinating. Again and again, he reminded himself not to become a prisoner of his own thoughts. Because he knew that pressure becomes dangerous when the mind starts creating imaginary problems on top of real ones. And honestly, this is where many people suffer today. A problem appears. Then the mind immediately creates 10 more. You lose an opportunity. Now you are imagining a failed future. You make a mistake. Now you are convinced everyone is judging you. Something goes wrong. Now you believe everything is falling apart. The event itself may be difficult, but the story your mind creates makes it much worse. Marcus Aurelius recognized this pattern, and he developed a habit that became one of the foundations of Stoicism. Whenever pressure appeared, he separated facts from imagination. Facts, not fears. Facts, not assumptions. Facts, not worst-case scenarios. Imagine receiving terrible news. Most people instantly jump into panic. What if this happens? What if that happens? What if everything goes wrong? But Marcus Aurelius would pause. He would ask himself a simple question. What are the actual facts of the situation? Not tomorrow's fears, not future possibilities. What is real right now? Because reality is often far less terrifying than the stories we tell ourselves. This habit allowed him to remain calm when others became overwhelmed, and it reveals the first Stoic secret. Pressure grows whenever imagination becomes stronger than reality. The moment you return your attention to facts, pressure begins to lose some of its power. But that was only the beginning, because Marcus Aurelius discovered another truth that completely changed the way he handled difficult situations. One morning, long before sunrise, reports arrived from the frontier. The situation was serious. The empire faced growing threats. Decisions needed to be made quickly. Lives depended on those decisions. Most leaders would have felt consumed by anxiety. After all, the stakes were enormous. But Marcus Aurelius reminded himself of something that would become one of the most famous ideas in Stoicism. You control your actions. You do not control outcomes. At first, this sounds almost too simple. Yet it may be one of the most powerful psychological tools ever created. Think about how much stress comes from trying to control things that cannot be controlled. Other people's opinions, future events, market conditions, unexpected problems, the behavior of strangers. Most people spend enormous amounts of energy worrying about things completely outside their influence. Marcus Aurelius believed this was one of the fastest paths to misery, because every minute spent fighting reality is a minute wasted. Instead, he focused his attention on what remained under his control: his choices, his effort, his discipline, his character, his response. And something remarkable happens when you make that shift. Pressure begins to transform. Instead of carrying the weight of the entire future, you focus on the next action. Instead of obsessing over outcomes, you focus on behavior. Instead of asking, "What if everything goes wrong?" you ask, "What is the right thing to do right now?" Suddenly, the burden becomes lighter, not because the situation changed, but because your relationship to the situation changed. This idea became especially important during one of the darkest periods of Marcus Aurelius' reign. A devastating plague swept through the Roman Empire. Entire communities suffered. Fear spread everywhere. Death became a daily reality. No emperor could stop it overnight. No leader could magically remove the crisis. Marcus Aurelius understood this. So rather than wasting energy demanding certainty from an uncertain world, he focused on doing what could be done, day by day, decision by decision, action by action. That mindset protected him from something that destroys many people under pressure: helplessness. Because pressure becomes unbearable when you believe there is nothing you can do. But there is almost always something you can do, even if it is small, even if it is imperfect, even if it only improves the situation slightly. Marcus Aurelius believed action creates clarity, while panic creates confusion. And this is where many people get trapped. They wait for certainty before acting. They wait for confidence before moving. They wait for fear to disappear before taking the next step. But Marcus Aurelius learned something different. Courage does not arrive before action. Courage often appears because of action. The first step creates the second. The second creates the third. And eventually, momentum replaces fear. But there was one final lesson that allowed Marcus Aurelius to remain calm when pressure reached its highest levels. A lesson that may be even more important than everything we have discussed so far. Because this lesson explains why some people remain composed during chaos while others collapse completely. And strangely enough, it has nothing to do with controlling circumstances. It has everything to do with controlling expectations. Most people secretly believe life should be easier than it is. And when reality fails to match those expectations, they become frustrated, angry, and overwhelmed. Marcus Aurelius chose a different path. Every morning, he reminded himself that challenges would come. Difficult people would appear, problems would arise, obstacles would exist. He did not expect a perfect day. He prepared for an imperfect one, and that single habit changed everything. Most people wake up and immediately begin negotiating with reality. They expect the day to go smoothly. They expect people to behave reasonably. They expect plans to work perfectly. And when reality refuses to cooperate, frustration takes over. A delayed meeting ruins their mood. A rude comment stays in their head for hours. A small setback feels like a personal attack from the universe. Marcus Aurelius understood this trap. That is why every morning he prepared his mind before facing the world. Not with motivational speeches, not with positive affirmations, but with reality. He reminded himself that difficult people would exist, selfish people would exist, arrogant people would exist, dishonest people would exist. And because he expected these things, he was rarely shocked by them. Think about how powerful that is. Most suffering comes from the gap between expectation and reality. You expect respect. You receive criticism. You expect loyalty. You experience betrayal. You expect certainty. You encounter chaos. And suddenly, the emotional pain becomes twice as heavy because reality failed to match the picture in your mind. Marcus Aurelius removed much of that extra suffering by accepting reality before it arrived. He did not expect life to be easy. He expected life to be life. And and that made him incredibly difficult to disturb. Imagine walking into a stressful situation already prepared for obstacles. Imagine expecting challenges instead of being surprised by them. Imagine understanding that difficulty is normal instead of viewing it as proof that something is wrong. Your entire emotional experience changes. Pressure loses one of its greatest weapons: surprise. Because pressure becomes far more dangerous when it catches you unprepared. Marcus Aurelius knew this from experience. For years, he lived on military frontiers. For years, he dealt with uncertainty. For years, he faced situations where no perfect solution existed. And over time, he discovered something fascinating. The strongest people are not the people with the easiest lives. They are the people with the strongest expectations. Not expectations that everything will go perfectly. Expectations that they can handle whatever comes. That difference changes everything. Most people seek confidence by trying to predict the future. Marcus Aurelius built confidence by trusting his ability to respond to the future. One approach creates anxiety, the other creates strength. Think about how often pressure comes from wanting guarantees. You want to know exactly how things will turn out. You want certainty before taking action. You want proof that everything will work. But life rarely gives those guarantees. The future remains hidden. And Marcus Aurelius understood that fighting this reality only creates more stress. Instead, he developed what may be one of the most powerful mental habits ever practiced. He focused on the present moment, not as a motivational slogan, as a survival strategy. Because pressure almost always lives in the future. What if I fail? What if things get worse? What if I cannot handle it? What if everything falls apart? Notice something interesting. Most of those fears exist in a future that has not happened, yet people suffer from them as if they are already real. Marcus Aurelius refused to surrender his peace to imaginary futures. Whenever his mind drifted too far ahead, he brought it back. Back to the present. Back to the current task. Back to the next action. Back to what could actually be done right now. This habit became one of the foundations of his calmness. Because the present moment is usually manageable. The future often feels overwhelming. A year of problems feels impossible. One day is manageable. 10 years of uncertainty feels terrifying. One step is manageable. An entire mountain looks intimidating. The next few feet are manageable. Marcus Aurelius understood this deeply. That is why he constantly reminded himself not to carry tomorrow's burdens today, because every unnecessary burden weakens the mind. And under pressure, mental energy becomes one of your most valuable resources. This brings us to a night that perfectly illustrates the Stoic approach to pressure. Imagine Marcus Aurelius once again sitting alone after a long day, reports scattered across a table, military updates arriving from distant regions, political tensions growing, decisions waiting to be made. The kind of pressure that would keep most people awake all night. Yet instead of allowing fear to consume him, he returned to a simple question. What is required of me now? Not next month, not next year, now. That question cuts through chaos. It cuts through anxiety. It cuts through overthinking. Because pressure often becomes unbearable when the mind tries to solve everything at once. Marcus Aurelius knew that was impossible. Life unfolds one moment at a time, one decision at a time, one action at a time. And strangely enough, this creates a kind of freedom. Because you stop trying to carry the entire future on your shoulders. You focus on the present responsibility instead. And this leads to another Stoic secret that modern people desperately need. Marcus Aurelius never believed calmness meant the absence of fear. That is a common misunderstanding. People imagine Stoics as emotionless statues, unshaken by anything, unaffected by hardship. But Marcus Aurelius was human. He felt fear. He felt stress. He felt uncertainty. The difference was that he refused to let those emotions control his actions. That distinction is enormous, because many people believe they must eliminate fear before moving forward. Marcus Aurelius understood that fear is often unavoidable. The goal is not to destroy fear. The goal is to prevent fear from becoming your master. Imagine standing before a difficult conversation, a risky decision, a major life change. Fear appears naturally. Marcus Aurelius would not tell you to pretend the fear does not exist. He would tell you to act correctly despite it. And that is where real courage begins, not in the absence of fear, but in refusing to obey fear automatically. This mindset helped him survive pressures that would have broken many people, because pressure always tries to pull your attention toward emotion, toward panic, toward worst-case scenarios, toward self-doubt. Marcus Aurelius constantly pulled his attention back toward reason, back toward facts, back toward action, back toward character. And slowly, over years of practice, this created something powerful: inner stability, a kind of mental foundation that remained strong even when circumstances became unstable. And that foundation would be tested again and again throughout his life. Because the greatest challenge Marcus Aurelius faced was not war, it was not politics, it was not disease, it was not uncertainty, it was his own mind. And in the next part, you will discover the final Stoic secret that allowed him to remain calm under extraordinary pressure. A lesson so powerful that it can completely change the way you handle stress, setbacks, and difficult situations in your own life.